The cafe on Maple Street was small, cozy, and usually quiet on weekday mornings. The clinking of cups and soft hum of the coffee machine blended with the low chatter of regulars. Most of them knew each other by face, if not by name. And they all knew Lena, the petite waitress with kind eyes and a calm, reserved presence. She worked hard, spoke little, and always wore a polite smile. Many assumed she was shy. Others assumed she didn't speak English well. After all, she had a faint accent, and whenever customers spoke too quickly, she would simply nod and respond with short phrases like, sure, or, okay. No one questioned why she chose silence more than speech. That morning, everything changed. At precisely 9:14 a.m., the cafe door swung open with dramatic flair, slamming against the bell so hard it nearly rang itself off its hook. A tall man entered, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His shoes were polished to a mirror sheen, and an expensive cologne followed him like a royal trumpeter announcing his arrival. He had the swagger of someone who was used to being noticed. And he was. He didn't bother to look at the menu. Instead, he scanned the cafe like a king inspecting his kingdom before landing his gaze on Lena. He didn't smile warmly or greet her politely. He smirked. Hey, he called, snapping his fingers. The sound echoed, making several heads turn. Lena, who had been refilling sugar jars, paused. She set them down and walked toward him cautiously. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. Serve me in English, he said slowly, as though speaking to a toddler. Then, with a booming laugh that filled the entire cafe, he added, and I'll pay you $1,000. A couple of teenagers at a nearby table snickered. A middle-aged woman frowned disapprovingly. The manager, peeking from the kitchen, looked like he was about to faint. He mouthed something urgently at Lena, probably, let it go, or, just walk away. But Lena didn't move. Her hands were steady, her expression unreadable. She could have ignored him. She could have rolled her eyes and walked away. But instead, she reached for a cup and gently placed it on the counter in front of him. Then she set down a saucer. Then a spoon. Each movement was deliberate, elegant, almost ceremonial. The millionaire grinned wider, thinking she had accepted the challenge. He crossed his arms smugly. Then, in a voice clear and composed, Lena finally spoke. Would you prefer your coffee with or without sugar, sir? She didn't mumble. She didn't hesitate. Her English was perfect, crisp, polished, like she had been born and raised in London. The cafe went silent. The man's grin faltered, but that was only the beginning. The silence in the cafe was so heavy that even the espresso machine seemed to pause mid-hiss. The millionaire blinked, his confident smirk dissolving like foam on hot milk. For the first time since he swaggered in, he sat up straight. Before he could react, Lena reached for the sugar jar and held it delicately. Her posture was poised, her gaze steady. Au peut être le prendre sans sucre. She continued smoothly, her French rich and elegant, like she had stepped out of a Parisian film. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The millionaire's eyebrows shot so high they nearly vanished into his slicked-back hairline. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words. Lena wasn't finished. She picked up a tiny honey jar and gently set it next to his cup. "Oh magari con un po' di miele?" she asked in perfect Italian, each syllable rolling beautifully from her tongue. The teenagers who had been snickering earlier now stared at her with wide eyes, whispering, is she real? One of the older gentlemen who visited daily, a retired professor who usually buried himself in crossword puzzles, lowered his newspaper with astonishment. His lips twitched upward into a proud smile, as if he were witnessing a moment of justice unfold. Still composed, Lena tilted her head slightly and continued, sounding as casual as if she were naming breakfast specials. "O quizás con un toque de canela," she added in Spanish, her accent smooth and natural. The millionaire's face transitioned through multiple shades, confusion, embarrassment, disbelief, before settling on stunned. Lena wasn't showing off. She wasn't theatrical. She didn't raise her voice or gloat. She simply spoke, effortlessly shifting between languages as if flipping pages in a well-read book. But she had one more card to play. She gently poured a splash of cream into the cup, and in impeccable German, asked, "Oder machten Sie lieber etwas Sonne?" And that was it. The cafe erupted. It wasn't polite clapping. It wasn't a few supportive nods. It was thunderous applause. Customers stood up from their seats. Someone whistled. One woman actually said, "Yes." Teach him. Even the manager stepped out from behind the counter, shaking his head with a grin of disbelief. I had no idea, he murmured to himself. The millionaire, completely disarmed, sat frozen like a statue. His arrogance had melted into pure awe. He looked at Lena not as a waitress, but as someone he severely underestimated. His hand trembled slightly as he reached into his sleek wallet. Without another word, he pulled out a stack of crisp $100 bills and placed them on the counter. All 1,000 of them. Lena looked at the money. Then at him. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She simply folded her hands calmly and said in English, "Your coffee will be right out, sir." And she walked away, gracefully, leaving him drowning in his own silence. The millionaire sat there, shoulders stiff, staring at the untouched money on the counter as if it were suddenly radioactive. His loud, mocking laughter from earlier now echoed shamefully in his head. The customers, who only minutes ago had been silent witnesses, were now buzzing with excitement. Some whispered about how satisfying it was to watch arrogance crumble. Others stared at Lena with newfound admiration. When she returned with his coffee, she placed it gently on the table without a trace of bitterness or pride. Her poise was unshaken. She could have smirked. She could have delivered a clever remark. But she didn't. She simply stood tall, dignified and calm. The millionaire cleared his throat, attempting to recover his composure. But his voice, usually booming, came out much softer. "Miss, I owe you an apology." Lena didn't respond immediately. She just looked at him steadily, waiting. I made an assumption about you," he continued, visibly struggling with humility. "I thought," he hesitated, embarrassed to even say it, "I thought you weren't educated." A few customers scoffed at his choice of words, but Lena stayed silent. He took a deep breath. "Where did you learn all that?" he asked finally, almost pleading to understand. Lena's expression softened slightly. "I grew up in a multilingual household," she said. "My mother is Italian, my father is French. We lived in Germany for 10 years. Then I studied Spanish in university before moving here." The café collectively blinked. They had known her for months, and yet, none of them really knew her story. They had all drawn their own quiet assumptions. The millionaire swallowed. "Then, why are you working here?" Lena gave a gentle smile, not of sadness but of quiet conviction. "Because language skills don't buy experience," she said. "I'm saving to become a professional interpreter. And until then, I serve coffee." Her words landed like poetry. There was no self-pity in her tone. No resentment, just dignity. The millionaire sat back, humbled beyond measure. He stared at the stack of cash again and pushed it closer to her. "Please," he said earnestly. "Take it, not as a prize, as an apology, and respect." Lena looked at the money for a moment. Then, softly, she pushed it back again. "Respect earned through humiliation is not respect," she replied. "Keep it, spend it wisely." His eyes widened at her refusal. He wasn't used to hearing no. Especially not after offering money. Before leaving, he stood and looked around at the customers, who were all watching closely. "To everyone here," he said loudly, "I was wrong today. Never judge someone by where they stand. You never know where they've been, or where they're going." With that, he placed the money in the tip jar, not for her, but for all the staff, and walked out, quieter than he had come in. The cafe erupted again, not because of the money, but because of her. Lena didn't just win an argument. She rewrote the rules of respect without raising her voice. And from that day forward, she didn't just serve coffee. She served silence to arrogance, and the world applauded.